Hello, and welcome to another episode of TNT, the Teaching Tips podcast from the Teaching Innovations Office of the University Teaching and Learning Commons. I'm your host, Ben Peterson, the Teaching Tips guy, and today we have a really rich episode on the topic of academic integrity at UNCG. I was fortunate enough to have two guests for this episode. One, Robert Barker from the Office of Students' Rights and Responsibilities, and Mitch Croatt, Department Head of Chemistry, who has experience with participating in panels for students who are engaging in the academic integrity process, and as a faculty member who has reported cases through the system. We had an extensive conversation based on insights that they've had from years of working with the system and working with students who are going through the system. So let's jump straight into that conversation with Robert and Mitch. I'm joined today by Robert Barker, Director of the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities, and Mitch Croatt, Associate Professor in Chemistry and Department Head of Chemistry. Robert, Mitch, thanks for joining me today on the Teaching Tips podcast.
Glad to be here. You're welcome.
So our topic today is academic integrity at UNCG. Robert, can we start by just having you give us a brief overview of academic integrity from your office's perspective, number and types of violations, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So I've been here since January of 2014, and in my years here, we've seen an increase in violations every semester, every year. And so most recently, this past year, we had 205 violations. The year before that, we had 199. And so in 2014, that number was around like 130. So as you can see, there's been a huge increase in the number of violations, and that can be explained for any number of reasons. For me, I like to kind of coincide with me getting here, whether that's good or bad for students or faculty, I'm not sure. Just really educating faculty and really pushing that if you're going to issue a grade, sanction, or penalty to a student, to really use our process. I think that's really helped not necessarily increase those numbers, but give students an avenue to kind of go through our process. When it comes to the specific violations, there are 5 of them. We have plagiarism, cheating, misuse of academic resources, falsification, and our newest one is Unauthorized Behaviors. And so I'm not going to get into details about those specifically, but most folks kind of recognize plagiarism, cheating type pieces. Those are our 2 biggest ones. It used to be plagiarism by far. In the last kind of 4 years, that was always at the top. Last couple of years, cheating has kind of really grown close to that, and last year they were kind of neck and neck for number 1 and number 2 in our system. And usually with cheating, it's one of those situations where we see the normal, students looking on someone else's paper or, trying to give answers when they shouldn't be giving answers, things of that nature when it comes to cheating. The thing we find with plagiarism is a lot of students just, unfortunately, don't know how to write properly. And we try to explain to them that, they need to do some research on their own and understand what style is appropriate for their classes, whether it may be MLA or APA. But we recognize that a lot of students come from a variety of backgrounds where in high school, if they turned a paper in, they got a credit for it. Whereas other students, they had to turn it in and also have it done properly and not plagiarize. And so they come to college, there's kind of a disconnect in those situations. So I think we've seen that over the years as well. As far as kind of our process and our sanctions, we offer 2 options for faculty. We have one that's called the Education Resolution Program, and one's called Permanent Record Program. And so the difference there being, if a faculty chooses to use the Education Resolution Program, at the point that the student graduates from UNC Greensboro, that violation goes away. It does not follow them throughout. So they're going to grad school, for example, law school, medical school, it doesn't stay with them. The permanent record notation does, and that literally is on their record for life. So 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, it'll always be within our system in that process. And it's really up to each faculty member to determine which direction they want to go in. Our recommendation is really your discretion. Literally, someone called me, I'll say, it's up to you, but I will give them some examples. In the past, we've seen this be used or that be used. But at the same time, some faculty have their own system that they use. They'll say no matter what the violation is, it's always going to be permanent record, for example, or it'll be education resolution, for example. And so we always encourage you to make it kind of specific to the situation, right? Because sometimes you may have a student who plagiarizes a 20-page paper and another student who does 2 sentences, and they're getting the same permanent record notation. And someone argued that doesn't necessarily fit the violation, but for us, you shouldn't have done it to begin with. So our minds is really your discretion as a faculty member in those situations. Ultimately, our goal is to help educate our students, and we offer what's called educational experiences, whether you choose permanent record or the Education Resolution Program. The experiences range anything from workshops to online tutorials to reflection papers, really something geared to help them understand where they went wrong and how they can learn from their mistakes.
Is it, for a student, once they've been through the process, are they sort of in contact with your office throughout the rest of their time as a student, or is it really dependent on any individual student has different sorts of engagement with your office?
It just depends. Typically, the way we handle it is once the faculty member goes through the process and submits the paperwork to our office, at that point, we're responsible for making sure the student does what they're required to do. So we'll follow with the student. We send them a letter notifying them that we've received the violation report form. Here are your sanctions. Here are your due dates. And then we always make sure we check in. Like if they're late on an assignment, we'll say, hey, this is due. It needs to be turned in through that process. And so really, we try to make it very easy for faculty. Once they have had the meeting, submit the form to us, they're kind of out of the mix. And that's intentional. Kind of let them focus on their aspects of it and let us how to handle the rest of it. And the way the policy is set up, if a student, for example, if a student goes through the education resolution process, which basically says, again, no permanent record notation. If they fail to do their sanctions, then it actually flips to a permanent record notation. So that's kind of another way that they're held accountable to that besides our office.
Got it.
And likewise, if there's a second violation, then automatically both of those are then put into the permanent record. And just to give my 2 cents on the process, I think the fact that we have those two options, that you have a temporary one that's tied in with them having some sort of educational resolution to it, and a permanent one, having those options really ties into the Dean of Students Office and the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities, kind of their overall philosophy of having this not be a punitive, some sort of like punishment, and instead more of an educational process. That's something that I really like about the process is it's not just trying to find students and punish them, but to educate them. One of the things that I tell my students in my class is I've made a lot of bad decisions in my life as well. If you want to know a handful pretty quickly, you can ask my wife and she can tell you pretty quickly. So I make plenty of bad decisions. And in my class, I teach organic chemistry. It's a really stressful course. And I tell students that, when you're under a high stress situation, good people can make bad decisions. And I don't want to punish someone severely, but there are consequences to actions. So they need to own up to their actions. They need to, make sure that they don't make those actions again in the future, kind of thing. And that's what the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities is really focused on, is trying to make sure that they don't repeat those actions again in the future.
So Mitch, can you share a little bit more, continuing along that line, in terms of, so you've participated both as a faculty member with students in the process, but also as a panelist on hearings. So could you expand for the audience on some insights that you've gained from either side or both of those sides of the process?
Yeah, so I'm very passionate about academic integrity. Like I said, I teach organic chemistry, and that's a really difficult course, and I have very high standards. I'm not known, definitely in the chemistry and biochemistry department, as an easy professor. I'm definitely hard. I have very high standards, and therefore the students that are working hard and doing well in the class, I need to make sure I feel ownership that their efforts are fully seen out in their grades. So then if someone's cheating, that's really a disservice to them. So I take it very seriously. As a faculty member that brought cases forward, I tell all of my students on the first day of class, when I go over the syllabus, that if there's any issues at all, we will be going through the process. Here at UNCG, faculty members have the option of handling it in-house versus filing the paperwork. But myself personally, I want to ensure that if something happens, either happened in the past or happens again in the future, we need to make sure that that's all captured. But depending on the situation, it might be on their record temporarily, or it might be permanent, depending on how egregious the case is. I can tell you it's never a great interaction with the students, both whether I'm taking it forward or if I'm on the panel. It's not a fun time. People don't cheat and hope that they get caught, right? So, but I handle it very professionally, and I am happy to say that every case that I've dealt with, both as a panelist and a faculty member bringing it forward, things have gone through what I would call a very professional and courteous and formal manner, such that I was in a hearing one time where the student kept saying about how much they respected me, and I said how much I respected the student. We disagreed about whether or not they cheated on the exam, but there was still that mutual respect for one another, which I really like. The whole process is set up to remove kind of opinions and feelings from it, and just kind of much more, did the student cheat or did they not cheat or do plagiarism?
Great. So Robert, you had said that since you've been here, you've been dropping the hammer.
Absolutely.
So reports have gone up, and students that are found guilty of particular violations have gone up. Do you feel like that's tied to greater awareness or a change in the dynamics of what students feel like is and is not okay in the classroom? It could be a combination of both of those things. Do you have a sense from dealing with these cases if there is a change? And I'm leading into the next question, which is, if there has been a change, what can our faculty do from a design and delivery perspective to really change that trajectory a little bit, to say, well, what can we do to help diminish some of those, either diminish the temptation or diminish the opportunities that students have to commit some of these violations?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the awareness level. We try to raise the awareness level on campus for both faculty and students. I think students now in this generation know part of their rights, right? And recognizing that, as Mitch mentioned before, in the policy, faculty have their discretion whether they want to move forward or not. We encourage you to move forward with it. Anytime you're going to give a grade-related sanction to move forward with that process, you don't have to, but we encourage it. And for a number of reasons. Number one is because you don't know what that student is doing in other classes, right? That same student could have a previous violation. That same student could be cheating in other classes but have never been really held accountable to that. And so your interaction can really help stop them from doing it in other classes. But also in the sense of, if you don't turn it in, and let's say that student does have a prior violation, they should be suspended from school. And so we look at, is that equitable to other students who are being turned in from other faculty, right? And for us, it's about accountability and really holding them accountable, but giving them the tools to be successful moving forward. A lot of students, as I said earlier, come to college and aren't prepared for college, especially academic-wise, and we're trying to help them, give them some little tools. A little online workshop on plagiarism can go a long way for a student that has never really experienced that before. And so I think the awareness level is there. I think also students are more apt to just come forward and say, hey, here are my concerns. In my office, students will come meet with us and say, I have a meeting with a faculty member scheduled for an integrity violation. What are my rights? What can I do? And we explain to them, here are your rights as outlined on our website, and this is what you can and can't do in those meetings. And so I think now students know that process, and so it may be a little bit of awareness on both ends. As students in a meeting will say, well, look, I know that I have this right in this process. You can certainly do it without me, going through the process, but that certainly is not what's preferred based on kind of the experiences. So I think it's a little bit of both in the awareness level and just recognizing that things have changed over the years. And when it comes to when I was in college, we wrote our answers on our hands. Not me, but other folks that I know.
Of course
right?
not you.
Of course not. But now things have gotten certainly more. Students got more savvy when it comes to cheating. The kind of online environment has really created the opportunity to cheat more. I think going to your second part of the question, that's what I've seen a lot. Right, is the opportunity for students to cheat has increased. And so what are some strategies that faculty, I should say, are employing is, like Mitch does it in his classes, is offering multiple tests, right? So multiple versions of the same test. I know sometimes that's inconvenient for faculty members, but it really helps because if you have a large lecture course, for example, and you have 4 different versions, then those students may try to cheat, and sometimes that's how we catch them, actually. I know I worked with Mitch in the past, and that's how we caught one of Mitch's students, is because they didn't know that there was a second version, and so their answers matched the other version to a T, and that's what led us to have that conversation with them. And so I think having the ability to create multiple versions of a test is important, is a way to deter that process as well. Also, not using multiple choice as your biggest part of your test. Multiple choice is something that if I look at someone's paper, I can see if it's the first bubble, the second bubble, the third bubble that's selected. But if it's a short answer essay or if it's a fill in the blank, it's a little bit harder in that process. So I think those are 2 things I've seen over the years that faculty have started to change in that process that's really helped deter that piece. But we've also had an increase in violations. So I think it's kind of a twofold awareness, but also let me figure out how I can adjust my courses to hopefully help educate students about what's going on and also lower the number of violations.
Yeah, I would definitely say that I think the culture around campus, at least from what I've seen, is, at least in our department, more faculty are interested in bringing forward cases. I think there used to be a little bit of a culture of, oh man, there's going to be a bunch of paperwork, I have to fill this out, it's going to be really onerous. And in the end, the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities website has the forms. They have templates of an email to send out to the students that they're aware of their rights. They've got videos you can watch. There's all sorts of information to help the faculty members go through the process. And also, I think in terms of culture, I think there's been more trying to get faculty to, put forward the paperwork so that the student files accurately represent, any sort of academic integrity violations or whatever. So I think there's a culture change. And in terms of, multiple versions of the exam, so Robert's right. And I tell my students, there's different versions. And I don't say to, stop you from cheating, but I say, the answer key I posted is only for, one version, but it's just reordering the questions. But yeah, I frequently will have, well, not frequently, but I multiple times have had students that gave the right answer for the wrong question, which was a pretty easy for me to find that someone cheated in that case.
So nuts and bolts, this might be a little hard to do over an audio medium, but do you have like a spreadsheet that you use to randomize the question? What's your strategy? What's your tips and tricks for someone who is in a high enrollment classroom for which multiple choice questions are just a reality of some of that situation? What's your go-to strategy for making that happen?
Yeah, so I usually, for my class, I usually have just 2 different versions. Sometimes I may go as far as 3, and I just kind of reorder the questions. So for organic chemistry, that just means, moving things around on the page. To be completely honest and transparent, I usually try to reorder, switch the spot of 2 questions where they look sort of similar visually. So if you're just kind of glancing at someone's exam, you might think, well, they have the same version as I do. And then they will put the right answer for the wrong question kind of thing. Another thing that I've done is, those different versions might print them on different color paper just to try to limit that. The downside of that is then it almost like gives a target for people to then look for someone that has the same color as they do. And really with these classes, it's stadium seating for these larger classes. So not only do you have the people on either side of you, you also are almost looking over the shoulder of the person ahead of you. So it is rather tempting. But I try to stress to my class, hey, do not cheat. It's not worth the consequences. I tell them all, because it's a fact, that at the beginning of that first day of class, I tell them all that I have caught someone cheating in every single undergrad organic chemistry class that I've had, and that every one of them were found responsible at the end of the day, and that every one of them regretted their decision. So I try to enforce to them that. Another thing that I do when I do talk about that, this is something I've been doing more recently, is I say a lot of the people that are found responsible say to me, but I'm not a cheater. And I say, well, but by definition you are. That may not be a habit you want to repeat, but realize you have done that. So some people say, I cheated, but I'm not a cheater. It's like, well, you are. So I emphasize to them that, unless you want to be a cheater, don't be doing this. And just the words that you use bear a little more weight, and I hope that at least for some people that kind of changes the course of their actions.
Great. So in this context, we're talking about sort of Robert's version of old school cheating, the ones that have been around for a very long time. But what are some of the things that either of you have noticed that are new technologies, new resources, new ways that, whether it's online internet era or just other things that have emerged recently that have changed what it means to cheat in a modern university?
I mean, a lot of the plagiarism cases that I've seen are no longer, and occasionally it'll be where they'll turn in the same work as their friend or something like that. But more often than not, it's plagiarizing from a website or plagiarizing from some pool of reports that are out there on the web kind of thing. And sometimes the students claim that they cited it improperly, but usually it's pretty obvious. In the cases where I have given a vote that they are responsible, it's something where they knew that what they were doing was wrong, because it was just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph that was verbatim copied. So that's more frequently what I'm seeing with plagiarism, is where people are copying and pasting from online sources, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think another thing that we've seen is just the opportunity for online options, right? And so, for example, a couple of things that we've seen recently is like Course Hero, Quizlet, StudySoup, right? These websites that are in essence designed to help you study, but what's happening is students are taking old information from previous semesters whether it be a study guide or maybe even a quiz or a test, posting it up there, and other students have access to that information. And then what's happening is that when they have that course, for whatever reason, it's the exact same test, right? And so they have the information already, and they're using it on the test. So they have that advantage, right? And we've seen that over the last couple of years where, multiple students in the class have had access to the information and have used that information on the test. Now, what happens sometimes is some faculty will maybe change one question or two questions, but the way it was worded last time, their answer would have been right last time. That's a very easy way to know that they've gained access to some information. And so it goes back to the opportunity for them to cheat, coupled with the fact that just a lot of faculty don't have the time, quite honestly, to make the necessary changes to their tests. I mean, I think it's I know it is for me, it's unrealistic to think you can change a test every single semester. But what we've seen is that whatever reason, students are able to get that information and then are using that moving forward in those classes. So I think those are the online options have been out there. That's big. I think one of the things that we've seen some faculty do to kind of help minimize that is to tell students, look, when you're in my course, you cannot post anything in my class to these websites. Because number one, it's a violation of the university's copyright policy. And I think a lot of students don't realize that. Just in general, students don't realize that me taking your PowerPoint lecture notes and putting them on StudySuit is a violation of the university's copyright policy. It's not necessarily a violation of the academic integrity policy, but it's a violation of another policy on campus. And so we've actually addressed that with students in the past, is when we get word of it from faculty, we'll bring them in and explain to them, hey, you didn't violate academic integrity policy, because in those situations, it was kind of minor stuff where I'm just posting this slide to this website. That's a violation of the copyright policy, not the AI policy. And so, but it's those little things that lead to other opportunities to post quizzes and tests. And so people are paying a premium in most of these sites to have access to this information, and they're wanting to get more than just the notes to a test. And so I think that's something that we've seen, and we're still trying to work on strategies on our end to kind of help minimize the ability to have that happen. Trying to work with some departments to just make them aware, hey, this is happening in your department. Let your faculty know this is there. And some faculty are trying to tweak the way that they put their tests up there, or the study guides, or at least changing some of the tests, kind of like Mitch talked about, just changing some of the answers so they don't have all the information from semester to semester, is something that we've seen.
Another thing that in terms of advice to faculty is, when these things happen, just add to your syllabus what you can and can't do, because if it does go to a hearing, the panelists, the stronger the evidence for the panelists that we have, the better we can back up the faculty on their saying that there was a violation. If they don't say you can't use these websites, and they're like, well, it should be obvious. Well, that's not obvious. And I've been in hearings where they've been pushing to say, like, well, they should have known that they can't do that. But there's all sorts of cultural differences, and there's certain things within the academic integrity policy that, if it's in there, it's in there, and ignorance is not innocence in this case. But sometimes there's definitely like shades of gray. But if you have it in the syllabus and you say explicitly, especially for group projects, for the group project you can do this together, but the report needs to be written, independent of one another. Or for this project you can use these websites, but you cannot use these websites. And a lot of the more heavily writing courses, they will have a specific section where they will just go into plagiarism, and then the more that they give to us as panelists, the better we're able to understand, what were the rules and regulations, for that course, to know whether, a violation happened or not.
It sounds like on the instructor side, you do syllabus statement, you do beginning of class, introduction of how important this is to you, and then before any sort of major assessment, you reiterate it. So that repetition is also an important part of that.
Absolutely.
So moving forward on this online environment side of things, what are some of the things that faculty who teach online may already be aware of these ways in which they're different, but for someone who may be looking to teach online or something like that, what are some differences between online and face-to-face environments in terms of the ability to and things that you have to be cognizant of to help dissuade students from committing some of these violations?
I think with the online classes compared to the in the class ones, it's just easier to cheat, quite frankly. Students are not being proctored or watched. They're kind of on the self-accountability piece of that, and sometimes that's easy for students, sometimes it's hard for other students. And so the thing that I've seen, especially the last couple years in some cases we've interacted with, is that faculty unfortunately cannot teach the online class like they teach the in-person class, and sometimes that happens. I've worked with a faculty member who literally has an in-person class and an online class, and they're taught the exact same. And that's been problematic when it comes to some of the assignments, because it sets up the opportunity for folks to be able to cheat on that. And it goes back to not changing some of the tests, not changing some of the structure of the assignments that are due. I think one of the biggest pieces between the online version versus the in-class version is really, I know it's difficult and it's not something that is very convenient, but it's adjusting the test. Right? It's very easy to have the multiple choice test because you can spit the answers out automatically, but it also sets the opportunity for students to, me and Mitch could be in the same room right now taking the test together, right? And there's some things built into Canvas to kind of figure that out: start times, stop times, how long we're on one question, did we go back and forth or not? But if we're savvy about it, we could be in the same room, take the test, and you would never know that we were in the same room taking it because it's multiple choice. When you have the opportunity to have those fill in the blank answers or the short answer, it's harder to cheat, because if we have the same exact 3 or 4 sentences, the same sentence structure, that's going to lead you to believe that there was cheating involved versus the opportunity not to know that on a multiple choice exam. So I think the biggest structure is really figuring out how can you tweak your class online to minimize the opportunity for students to cheat. So whether that's maybe adjusting some of the assignments, so you have more written assignments versus some quiz type things. That's not necessary for me to kind of go through as a non-faculty member, but I want to just kind of give the point of what we've seen over the years is that when they're the exact same, it just presents the opportunity to make it easier for students to go through that process and cheat.
Yeah, there's lots of complexity. There are options out there for online courses in terms of, some of them are online hybrid where, maybe the quizzes or exams are given on campus a couple times during the semester, or there's certain proctor agencies where you have to have someone proctor it and everything like that. Those add complexity in terms of organization and logistics, but then it decreases the chance to have students cheating on their courses. So there's pros and cons to it, kind of thing. It's definitely not as easy as Robert pointed out. It's not as easy as just teaching the same class, but now you're posting the lectures online instead of having live lectures. It's definitely more complicated than that.
Yeah, and that would be true for good pedagogy as much as it
Correct.
is in terms of academic integrity. But it's nice that those things go hand in hand. If you're doing things to improve an online learning experience, you're also doing things that'll mitigate that academic integrity question as well.
Absolutely.
Great. So we're on a theme of changing circumstances, the way things are changing. What are some of the ways that the academic integrity policy as such has changed as circumstances have changed? You had mentioned that there's a new potential violation, but what are some of the ways, including that the policy has shifted as the environment has shifted?
Yeah, so a couple years ago, and Mitch was actually a part of that process, we really took a look at the policy and wanted to make it easier to read, easier to understand for students, but also hit on some things we've been hearing from faculty along the way. And so to give you an example, as I mentioned earlier, one of the newest violations is called Unauthorized Behaviors. And what that in a nutshell means is that as a faculty member, you're able to state in your class what is a violation to you. So Mitch may say something in his syllabus that would be a violation in his class, but that necessarily wouldn't be a violation in my class. So we give complete discretion in that situation, but it's important to remember you have to state it to the students, either on your syllabus, in class, on Canvas, somewhere that they understand that that's a violation.
Preferably all of the above.
Absolutely.
Over
correct.
and over, right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And really what led to that situation is a couple of years ago we had a case where, again, large lecture hall, which tends to, some of these cheating cases really derives from those large lecture halls. We had a situation where there were 2 students that were in the very back of the classroom, and faculty members at the front, had a kind of a TA walking around a little bit, but for the most part, just students taking the exam. And the faculty member looked up and observed 2 students that were mouthing something to each other. And so in that situation, he assumed they were cheating and went up there and ended up taking their test or whatever, went through our process. Well, went through their hearing process, and the students' argument was that they were, talking about what they were going to do for dinner that night, because they were talking in a different language as well. So you couldn't really understand what they were saying, but they were talking. It was certainly clear they were having some communication. Their answers on the test very similar as well, which led another factor to say that this was most likely a violation. And so in that situation, we charged them for cheating because based on what they did, it really fit. At the time, it fit what that definition of cheating meant. But that situation, them talking in the class and trying to argue that, well, we were just talking, I was like, Mitch, where do you want to go to dinner tonight?
Mm-hmm.
And for them, that was their argument, and the panel didn't buy it at all because they knew that, based on the definition of cheating, the answers were very similar to the test. They were talking that most likely there was a violation that occurred. One of the things we did is we said, well, let's make it a little easier for faculty, a little more clear for students as well. So we added that unauthorized behaviors piece. So now in the classroom, Mitch can say, during an exam, you cannot talk. And if you're talking, you can be held accountable through the process, no matter if you're asking about dinner or the answer number 3. Same situation. It also applies for some faculty, and this is something that we encourage in our office, is when you're having an exam, a lot of faculty would say, you cannot have any materials out during the exam, except for pen and paper or whatever you're using to take the test. That means your phone, that means your notebook, that means your book. And if it's out on the desk, even if you're not using it, it's a violation because I've told you you can't do that. And so that's really helped to kind of minimize some of the confusion surrounding the policy from the student and faculty perspective. It's also helped to educate students on what I can and can't do in the classroom. So when our office goes around and presents to students, we tell them, look, your faculty is going to tell you what you can and can't do in their class. And that may change from one class to the next. Like in one class, you can have your phone out on your desk. In another class, you can't. You need to understand what you can and can't do because it could be a violation. And so that's one of the things that we've done, try to make things a little easier for faculty, a little more clear for students. We also added in there some more specific language surrounding, for faculty, if you're going to give a grade-related sanction, you're encouraged to use the process. We recognize that it's faculty discretion whether they use it or not. The old policy didn't really state that as well as I think it could have, and so we actually added a statement in there that says, if you're going to give a grade penalty for any reason, you're highly encouraged to use this process. You're not required, but you're highly encouraged. And for us, it goes back to before, just really understanding why that's important and really holding folks accountable for their behavior.
Have you gotten the sense that, so I can see 2 possible responses to that. One is, and I think Mitch, you had said something to this effect before, is that there might be some feeling of exhaustion, like do I have to articulate every single, no scratching your nose during tests, no gestures that may or may not resemble some sort of coded, as a faculty member, you might start to get exhausted about the number of things you have to start to include, or you might really appreciate that control is not the right word, but that the ability to set the parameters of what academic integrity looks like to you and what you need to be within those boundaries. Have you gotten either of you sort of feedback as to whether that's been more of a benefit or another thing I have to do type response?
I think it depends on the faculty member. There's definitely faculty members that want to really capture everything on their syllabus and really appreciate the ability to have it there so as head and even before being department head, I sometimes would send out little blurbs to faculty saying, hey, you might want to include this on your syllabus, and some people really embrace that and they think, oh, that's great, and they like having kind of somewhat official wording. So what Robert was talking about earlier in terms of people posting their course notes and everything like that online, it's nice to have kind of the official, UNCG wording of what they can and can't do and why. But then there's also faculty that are like, all right, enough of the laundry list of things they can't do. I just want a 1-page syllabus or a 2-page syllabus, and that's it. And there's just, whatever doesn't fit kind of thing. So, that's one of the benefits of being a faculty member is we get independence of our courses. So that those that want it, that will use it, and those that don't want it won't use it. And hopefully it's not substantial enough that it would affect anything. But to me, I use the syllabus as really kind of setting the stage for the course, and I really take most or all of that first day to just kind of go through it with the students. That way everyone's on the same page. like I said, I didn't really have an appreciation of the different cultural changes or differences in cultures in terms of especially plagiarism. In some cultures, writing are just words instead of kind of more like property kind of thing. So I emphasize and even though in my course I don't typically have plagiarism cases in organic chemistry, but I emphasize to them, because I have that moment anyway, I have the captive audience, I let them know that plagiarism is in the same identical category as cheating, as falsification of data, and whether that we're talking about UNCG or we're talking about the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, that plagiarism is held in those same categories in terms of misconduct. And it kind of, like I said, I use that as an opportunity to educate them all. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not an irrelevant, if they're going on to write grants, there are any number of potential where those lessons cross all those boundaries and not just in the classroom environment.
And I'd rather them learn it at an earlier stage than a later stage, because as you go on, the consequences get to be much more severe.
Right.
Yeah. And another thing that's in the policy is we've identified some bullets under each violation about this constitutes cheating or plagiarism, for example. But we always make sure we put includes, but not limited to. That way you don't feel like you have to write every single piece down. It's kind of one of the things, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, if ducks are talking.
Yeah.
Right? Looks like a duck.
In their duck language.
In their duck language.
In the back of an exam.
Absolutely.
Ducks are
Exactly.
talking. Yeah.
Exactly.
Then more likely than not, it's a duck, right? Same thing for cheating. And so, so we're not expecting you to write every single thing down. We just want to give you the option to, because some faculty have some very specific rules in their course that may not apply to others. And so we want to make it more clear for them to be able to do that while also having the student understand what's required of them in the classroom.
Great. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So, picturing two faculty here again, if someone's listened to 30 plus minutes of podcasts about academic integrity, they have some sort of interest, some sort of engaged thoughts about this. So I imagine that there's one group of faculty who are passionate about it and would like to get more involved, like Mitch, you have. And then the second category is someone who, are concerned about their own coursework, but not beyond that, but want to be more prepared for how to deal with potential violations in the future. So what are some takeaways for either of those groups, a group of faculty who would like to get involved with OSRR, or the group that is just, what's my first takeaway, what's my first step for next things I can do to better prepare my course for potential violations?
Yeah, if faculty are interested in participating in the process, they're always looking for volunteers. Just to give you an idea, what happens is when they have a hearing that they need panelists for, and the panel is always made up of an equal number of faculty or staff and students. So they're always looking for volunteers. There's training that you do. They don't just throw you in and say, all right, is the person responsible or not? You really have to have an idea what they're looking for and what the burden of proof is and everything like that. So there's training that they do. They give you a lot of information. If you want, you can shadow. You can kind of be an observer in a hearing before actively participating if you choose. And then what they do is, whenever they need faculty at hearings, they then send out emails to the faculty that are on that list. And if you're available, you do it. And if you're not, then you don't. So it's really as simple as that. And I for myself, not only am I passionate about it, but that's a component of my service contribution to the university, is serving on these panels. It's an important service contribution to the university, and I've had my annual reviews. It's not like I got promotion and tenure based on serving on these panels, but it's a component that's helpful. And then in terms of if you're not interested in that aspect, but you're wondering what do I do next, my recommendation is go to the website, and if you have questions, sometimes there's many different avenues that you can go down. If ever you have questions, I've got their number, and I give them calls all the time, and I say, hey, this situation happened, what do you think about that? For example, when I had my first case of cheating, I called over there, talked to Mary Anderson over there. I remember I said, hey, so I had someone cheat in my class, and it was a large lecture, about 100 students, and I said, I want to actually make an announcement to the class to say, hey, someone cheated, because what I want them to do is come forward to me, not in class. I think that'd be horrible, but I tell them, someone cheated in this class on the exam, or I have reason to believe someone cheated in this class, if you cheated, I want you to contact me by the end of the day, because to me, owning up to something is a major component of getting through the process. So I said, you have until midnight tonight to contact me. And then what I say is, if you don't contact me, realize I am going to contact you. So please reach out to me. And I now do that every time. And having that conversation with Mary, she made me, kind of cognizant of what things I want to be aware of. She said, if this was a small class or if it was obvious who cheated, you don't want to do that, because then you have to worry about FERPA rights and everything like that. But she said for a large lecture, that'd be okay. She said, make sure that this just doesn't bust up the morale of the class. So when I do it, I say, the majority of you are working really hard, and I need, your efforts to be observed and represented on your exams. And for that reason, I won't allow that, so that, people in the class realize, all right, I'm not trying to punish someone. I'm trying to make sure that everyone has their effort, represented on their scores. And then also I tell them, that I've made a lot of bad choices too. So hopefully it kind of softens the blow, and like I said, for them students to own up to the process. But I wouldn't have done that if I wouldn't have first contacted the Dean of Students office at that time to have that phone conversation. And sometimes I've had cases where I wasn't sure, who cheated off of whom, and kind of wanted some advice moving forward, or more complicated situations. I always just pick up the phone and give them a call, and find that to be very helpful.
I have to admit, I was expecting the end of that story to be you had 5 students come forward.
I've had very different cases. So I have had cases where where I've, I guess, gone fishing and got more fish than I expected. I've had cases where the student that I knew cheated came forward, right, and that's what I was going for. And I've had plenty of cases where they don't come forward, and then I have to reach out to them. In one kind of more humorous case, I had a student that came forward and said, "I think you were looking at me when you said this, but I want you to know that I didn't cheat, but I think you think that I cheated." Well, that student did cheat, So they were like, so then when I responded, I kind of said to him, "So are you saying that you cheated or not? Because those are 2 different cases," kind of thing. And eventually we had the meeting. He fessed up to it, but it was just funny the email of, "I think you think I cheated, but I didn't cheat. Do you think I cheated?"
Absolutely.
So yeah.
As Mitch said, we recruit faculty year-round to serve on our conduct team. We do offer training twice a year, so we offer training typically in the fall semester. Is when our big training is. We also, if we get new panelists that come in after training, we'll do another one in the spring, and really do it whenever we need to in that situation. And as Mitch said, we try to make it as easy as possible. Certainly, you go through the training process, we do some shadowing of our hearings to get familiar with how the process works. But it's really up to your availability. There's no requirement. You don't have to serve on X amount of hearings a year or X amount of hours doing it. Once you're on the panel, you're on the panel for life.
Yeah, it's like the Supreme Court over here.
Absolutely. It's a lifetime commitment, right? But your availability is up to you. So I've had some faculty that will email me and say, "Hey, I can't do that one, but let me know about the next one." Some faculty say, "I can't do any this semester. Keep me on the list though, because I'll be more available next semester." It's really up to you and your availability. Once we get that availability, we just kind of match it up. Most hearings, we kind of allocate about 2 hours for it. We don't necessarily need 2 hours in most cases. If there's a situation that I based on the evidence and the situation that I'm like, yeah, this may take a little bit longer, I'll let you know that, right? But you can usually 2 hours is kind of what we do. And people always ask me, well, how many cases do you have a semester goes to a hearing? And I tell them it fluctuates. We can never predict it, because one semester we may have 3, and then for the whole semester, and then 1 week we may have 3. So last fall, for example, 2 falls ago, we had no hearings until December, and in December we had 10 hearings in December. And so the next semester we had 10 total. So really just it fluctuates in that process, but it's really based on your availability. So if folks are interested, they can go to our website to learn more about what we do, and then connect with me directly. I'd be glad to walk them through that, through the process, and get them on board. As far as faculty who have a situation that they're trying to figure out what to do, as Mitch said, call us. One of our main jobs is to consult with faculty and help them understand their options, just like students. We help faculty the same exact way, help them understand their options, what to do, and how the process works. The biggest thing for us is making sure that you follow the process properly. Because if not, that's where students kind of come back and feel concerned that their rights were violated in some type of way. So follow the process appropriately. We try to make it very easy for you. We have on our website, we made it actually easier than our website. You actually go to academicintegrity.uncg.edu, which has a whole page about academic integrity process, the policies on there, links to all the forms and documents on there. It actually will walk you through step by step what your role is. And so the first step, as Mitch alluded to a little bit earlier, is to send what's called the notification template to the student. That's on our website. You can download it as a Word document, or you can cut and paste it right from our website. It's important because it gives the students, it puts them on notice. All right, it puts them on notice that there's a potential violation. It gives them their rights as well of a student going through the process. And that's important because one of the rights that a student has is they can bring a support person with them to that meeting. That person is there literally to be quiet and just to observe. They're not allowed to speak at all, but they're there to support. And something that's good for students to have that support person. Faculty can also have a support person. It can be another faculty in their department. It can be another faculty somewhere else. They're there again, same concept, just to be there as a support person through the process. While I said it's important to trigger the process is key because of one big reason. Once the process has been started, students can no longer drop or withdraw from that course. And I think that's a big one. Sometimes what happens is students will get the email from Mitch and be like, well, I'm not going to respond to that, and just not show up. And so the way the policy and the process is set up is if that happens, then you actually move forward without them. And so if they don't contact you within five days, you move forward without them. And so that's why it's very important to send that email to let folks know, because that's what triggers the start of that. Recognizing that you may know it's a violation, but have some things coming on and haven't had time to send it yet, and then they may drop the course. In that situation, they never knew it was an issue, so we can't hold them to the same standards in that process. So our website, the academicintegrity.uncg.edu website, has a lot of good information there. It walks you through what a faculty-student conference is. It walks you through how to submit a referral. We have an online referral process to make it even easier for faculty. Basically what happens is once you do your meeting with your student, you go to our website. We have 6 pictures on the website. There's one over there that says report an academic integrity violation. You click on it, you fill out some information, it asks for your contact information, it asks for the student's information, and you're able to actually upload all the documents. So the form you had the student sign, you're able to upload your syllabus, the evidence, everything into one spot. You hit submit, it comes to me, directly to me, and you can keep the hard copies of information. And that's what we can use to move forward in our process. So I think it's important just to recognize we try to make it very easy in that process, but also we also recognize that some faculty just like the old school send it through campus mail, and we're good either way. As long as we have it, we're good. And I think that's the biggest thing I would say is just familiarize yourself with the process, familiarize yourself with the policy, our website, and just recognize that there are definitely some differences that you need to be aware of, and try to strategically design your course to limit opportunities for cheating. I think is kind of the biggest message I would say. And then the other takeaway is just if you have a question, call us, right? Recognizing, as Mitch said earlier, there's some cultural differences when it comes to some of our students. For example, we have international students who, in their home countries, it's a show of honor for me to use Mitch's work. But here, you need to cite that. There, they don't. I think that's going back to that whole cultural differences. And really, the reason I say familiarize with the policy is so that you can explain it to your students, so they understand what's expected of them, what they should do both in and outside the classroom. And at the end of the day, if you have a question, give us a call. Let us help you. That's what we're here to do.
Another thing to point out in terms of differences is the process and procedures here at UNCG are not tied with like the legal system. The burden of proof is very different. I've had faculty in my department, because I am active with it, that'll come to me, or in other departments actually, that come to me and say, hey, so you know about this, and they'll say, man, it's obvious that someone cheated, but I don't have videotape evidence of them cheating. I'm like, well, okay, so you don't have to take them to court, but you can still submit the paperwork. So the panel will look at it, and it's is it more likely than not that they cheated? So it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't need to be 100% obvious, but it needs to be more likely than not that someone cheated. So it's not like you need that smoking gun. You just have to have enough evidence to make it very clear that it is more likely than not that someone cheated, and that hurdle is a lot lower than the legal system. And I think it fits, and it's very typical for a university to have that burden of proof.
Yeah, if you have the video, we'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. But then it probably won't go to a hearing.
Right, absolutely. But most people don't need it. For us, we kind of always say it's 50% and a feather. Whatever tips it in favor of or not in favor of is all we need.
Got it. Well, that's all I've got for us. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks for the work that you do for academic integrity at the university. I know it's not just you all, it's a big effort, but thanks for your part in it, and thanks for joining me today on the Teaching Tips podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Take care.